Okay, so back in May 2024, I made 3 predictions. And I made these predictions when nobody believed me, when people were laughing at me, when my own students were looking at me like I had lost my mind. My first prediction was that Donald Trump would win the 2024 election. My second prediction was that Donald Trump, once he became president, would start a war with Iran. And my third prediction, the one that shocked everyone the most, was that the United States would lose that war. And in losing that war, the world would never be the same again. Okay, so now it's 2026, Trump won, the war started, and now people are starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, the third prediction is also coming true. So today, I do not want to talk about the past. I do not want to say, I told you so. That is not interesting. What is interesting, what I think you really need to understand, is what comes next. Because here's the thing. I did not make those predictions by guessing. I did not flip a coin. I did not read tea leaves. I made those predictions because I understand how history works. I understand the patterns. I understand the game theory. And those same patterns, those same structural forces are telling me very clearly what is going to happen next. So today, I want to share with you my next predictions. And I want to explain to you exactly why I believe they will come true. Not as prophecy, not as entertainment, but as serious structural analysis based on history and game theory. Why the first 3 predictions were right. Okay, so let's begin. But first, before I give you the predictions, I need to explain to you why the first 3 predictions were right. Because if you don't understand why they were right, you won't understand why the next predictions will also be right. Okay, so think about this. Why did I know Trump would go to war with Iran? The simple answer is this. America had no choice. Now, most people hear that and they say, wait, what do you mean America had no choice? America is the most powerful country in the world. America has more weapons than anyone. America can do whatever it wants. And that is exactly the wrong way to think about it. Let me give you an analogy. Think about a drug addict, okay? A drug addict has one goal, and that goal is to get the next fix. Not because they want to, not because they are choosing to, but because if they don't, if they stop, their whole system collapses. Their body shuts down. They cannot function. America is addicted to something, and that something is called the petrodollar. Here is how it works. Since 1973, all oil in the world has been traded in US dollars. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, everyone. You want to buy oil, you need dollars. This means the entire world must hold dollars. This means the entire world must buy American debt, American treasury bonds. And this is what finances the American empire. This is how America pays for its military, its government, its lifestyle. The whole thing is one giant Ponzi scheme held together by oil traded in dollars. Now, in February 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. Okay, why does this matter? Because when Russia invaded Ukraine, something happened that had never happened before. Russia, Iran, and China, 3 of the most powerful countries in the world, started moving closer together. They started trading in currencies that were not the dollar. They started building a Eurasian trade system that did not need American ships, did not need American banks, did not need American permission. And this is the existential threat to America. Not because Russia, Iran, and China are going to attack America, but because if the world stops needing dollars, the entire American financial system collapses overnight. The Ponzi scheme ends and America can no longer afford its empire. So America had to act. It had to break this alliance. And the weakest link, the most vulnerable member of this alliance was Iran. Iran was already sanctioned. Iran was already isolated, and Iran controlled the Strait of Hormuz, which is the most important choke point in global energy. If America could take out Iran, it could cut China off from Middle Eastern energy, it could reestablish petrodollar dominance, it could survive. That is why the war happened. Not because Trump is crazy, not because Netanyahu pushed him. Those are just details. The structural reason, the real reason, is that the American empire had no choice. The drug addict needed its fix. Okay, does that make sense? Good. The strategy of attrition. Let's keep going. Now, why did I know America would lose? Okay, so let me explain something about how wars actually work. Because most people think about war the wrong way. They think war is about who has the biggest guns, who has the most planes, who has the most money, and that is completely wrong. Let me give you another analogy. Okay, think about a school fight. In this school, there's a big bully. The bully is the biggest kid in school. He's got muscles, he's got a group of friends, he's got a reputation for being dangerous. Now, one day, a new kid arrives at school. Smaller kid, doesn't look very impressive. And the bully decides he's going to put this new kid in his place. Now, who wins this fight? Most people say the bully wins because the bully is bigger, stronger, more experienced. But here's what most people miss. The bully has something to lose. The bully has a reputation. If the bully fights the new kid and it doesn't go perfectly, if the new kid lands a punch, if the fight goes longer than expected, if the bully gets tired, the bully looks weak, his reputation suffers, and his whole power in the school is based on that reputation. The new kid has nothing to lose. For the new kid, every punch he lands is a victory. Every day he survives a victory. The longer the fight goes on, the worse it looks for the bully, and the better it looks for the new kid. This is exactly the dynamic between America and Iran. America went into this war expecting Iran to fold immediately. They expected shock and awe, massive bombing, decapitation of the leadership. And then Iran calls unconditional surrender done in 2 weeks, maybe 3. That is what they planned for. That is the only plan they had, and that plan failed on day 1 because Iran did not fold. Iran did not call uncle. Iran shot back. Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz. Iran attacked American bases across the Gulf. Iran fired missiles at Israel. Iran launched drones, cheap drones, $50,000 drones that flew over American bases and destroyed helicopters worth tens of millions of dollars. And here's the math that changes everything. Okay, the Americans are using interceptor missiles to shoot down Iranian drones and missiles. These interceptors cost anywhere from 3 million to 10 million each. The Iranian drones they are trying to shoot down cost $50,000 each. Do you understand what I'm saying? America is spending 60 times more money to defend itself than Iran is spending to attack. And Iran can produce drones faster than America can produce interceptors. This is not a fight America can win by spending more money. The more money America spends, the faster it loses. And this is Iran's strategy. This has always been Iran's strategy. They are not trying to defeat America in a single battle. They are trying to bleed America slowly. Every dollar America spends that Iran does not have to spend, that is an Iranian victory. Every week this war continues without America achieving regime change, that is an Iranian victory. Time is on Iran's side. Time is destroying America. Prediction 1, ground troops and hubris. Okay, so now I want to get to the real point of today's lecture, because now that you understand why predictions 1, 2, and 3 were correct, I want to tell you what comes next. I have 3 new predictions. Let me walk you through each one very carefully. My first new prediction is this: America will send ground troops into Iran. And this will be the biggest strategic mistake in American history since Vietnam. Now, let me explain the logic here, because some of you might say, wait, I thought the point was that the air campaign is failing. If the air campaign is failing, why would they escalate to ground troops? Wouldn't that make things worse? Yes, it will make things worse. That is exactly why they will do it. Here is what you have to understand about the American decision-making process right now. America went in with one plan: bomb Iran, force a surrender. The plan failed. Now what? If you are a rational actor, if you can step back and say, okay, this is not working, let's try something different, then you might negotiate, you might find an exit, you might cut your losses. But America cannot do that. And why? Because of something called hubris. Because the American leadership cannot admit that the plan failed, cannot admit that Iran has not surrendered, cannot say publicly, we made a mistake, this war is not going well, let's find a different path. So instead, what they do is they double down, they escalate, they say, okay, the bombing is not working, so let's do more bombing. And when that doesn't work, they say, okay, let's send in ground troops. Now think about what happens when ground troops enter Iran. America is not invading a flat desert country like Iraq was in 2003. Iran is 4 times the size of Iraq. Iran is mountainous. Iran has 90 million people. The reality is that Iran has not spent the last few years preparing for a symbolic confrontation. It has spent more than 2 decades preparing for a war of survival. Since the early 2000s, Iran's military doctrine has been built around one assumption: that eventually it could face a direct military invasion led by the United States and supported by regional allies. Everything about its strategy, its weapons development, its underground infrastructure, and its regional alliances has been shaped by that expectation. Unlike smaller states that rely on conventional air superiority, Iran's strategy is asymmetric. It understands that it cannot defeat the United States in a traditional open field battle. Instead, it has designed an environment where any invading force would become trapped inside a prolonged, exhausting, multi-front conflict. Deep inside Iran's mountains are networks of underground facilities, missile depots, command centers, and hardened military infrastructure built specifically to survive airstrikes and continue operating during wartime. Many of these facilities are intentionally concealed within mountainous terrain, where satellite surveillance and bunker penetrating weapons become less effective. Iran's military planners studied the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Lebanon, and Syria for years, adapting their defenses to counter the exact tactics America used in those conflicts. More importantly, Iran has invested heavily in weapons and tactics designed specifically for mountain warfare. Anti-armor systems, drone swarms, mobile missile launchers, electronic warfare systems, and ambush-based infantry strategies are all intended to target the strengths of American military doctrine. Helicopters, armored convoys, logistics chains, and forward operating bases become vulnerable in narrow mountain corridors where mobility is restricted and supply lines are stretched thin. In this kind of terrain, technological superiority does not always guarantee strategic victory. The battlefield itself becomes a weapon. But the most dangerous aspect of such a conflict is that it would never remain confined to Iran's borders. The moment American boots entered Iranian territory, the war could expand across the entire region simultaneously. Iran's regional alliance network was built precisely for this scenario. Groups aligned with Tehran in Iraq, Lebanon, Yemen, and elsewhere would not necessarily wait passively while Iran fought alone. Instead, the conflict could spread outward in multiple directions at once. American military bases throughout the Gulf region could suddenly face pressure from missile strikes, drone attacks, sabotage operations, and political instability. Strategic locations in Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq could all become part of a wider regional battlefield. Shipping routes through the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz would immediately become vulnerable. Energy infrastructure could become targets. Oil exports could slow dramatically. Instead of confronting Iran directly from a single front, the United States could find itself dealing with overlapping crises across an enormous geographic area. This creates a terrifying strategic possibility. The invading force gradually becomes the encircled force. Instead of America surrounding Iran and its regional allies could create conditions where American assets across the Middle East become isolated, overstretched, and politically difficult to sustain. Military power alone does not solve the problem of geography, logistics, and time, and Iran's leadership understands that deeply. The second major prediction is even more dangerous because it does not concern the battlefield alone. It concerns the internal stability of the United States itself. Wars are not only won through military strength, they are sustained through political cohesion. And modern America is entering this potential conflict already deeply divided economically, socially, and politically. Public support for another large-scale Middle Eastern war is limited. As casualties rise, economic costs increase, and global instability grows, domestic opposition would almost certainly intensify. Inflation, rising fuel prices, market instability, and supply chain disruptions would begin affecting ordinary Americans directly. The consequences of war would no longer feel distant. They would appear in grocery stores, electricity bills, transportation costs, and employment uncertainty. At the same time, the American political system is already under immense strain. Congress struggles to pass budgets consistently. Political polarization dominates public discourse. Trust in institutions continues to decline. Under those conditions, a prolonged regional war could become the catalyst for a severe internal political crisis. Iran's long-term strategy may not depend on defeating the United States militarily in the conventional sense. Instead, its objective could be to raise the economic and political cost of war to unbearable levels. If oil prices surge toward $150 or even $200 per barrel, the shockwaves would spread through the global economy almost immediately. Transportation, manufacturing, agriculture, and energy markets would all feel the impact. Food prices could rise, fertilizer shortages could affect agriculture, financial markets could react violently to uncertainty and instability. And when economic pain reaches ordinary citizens during an unpopular war, political systems begin to fracture internally. The conflict inside America would not necessarily take the form of armed confrontation. It would manifest as a political and institutional breakdown. Intense battles between factions demanding escalation and factions demanding withdrawal. Decision-making becomes slower, more emotional, and more reactive. Strategic clarity disappears precisely when it is needed most. Historically, this is often how great powers weaken. Empires rarely collapse solely because of a single battlefield defeat. More often, they become exhausted internally, then financially drained, politically divided, and strategically overstretched. External wars expose internal fractures that already existed beneath the surface. The third prediction is the most controversial and perhaps the most consequential. It is the idea that the current global order itself may be approaching a major transformation. Since the end of World War II, the international system has largely revolved around American dominance. The U.S. dollar became the world's reserve currency. American naval power secured global trade routes. Institutions such as the IMF and World Bank helped structure the global financial system. This entire framework became known as the Pax Americana, the American-led international order. But global systems are not permanent. Every empire eventually faces the same question. Can it continue carrying the cost of maintaining global dominance? Critics of the current order argue that the system increasingly serves financial and geopolitical elites whose primary concern is preserving global control structures rather than national interests alone. In this interpretation, military power functions as the enforcement arm of a larger financial architecture. Stability, trade routes, currency dominance, and market access all depend on the existence of overwhelming geopolitical force. The concern emerging among some analysts is that the American system is showing signs of fatigue. Endless military engagements, rising debt, political paralysis, declining public trust, and strategic overextension raise doubts about long-term sustainability. Wars become more expensive. Public consensus becomes weaker. Global rivals become more capable. Within that framework, some observers argue that power centers around the world are searching for new strategic anchors. States or alliances perceived as more unified, more determined, and more willing to act decisively regardless of international criticism. Israel is sometimes discussed within this context because of its strong national cohesion during wartime, advanced military capabilities, intelligence networks, and willingness to pursue long-term strategic objectives despite external pressure. From a purely strategic perspective, supporters of this theory argue that successful powers require three characteristics: unity, capacity, and determination. Unity means maintaining public support during prolonged crises. Capacity means possessing technological and military strength. Determination means sustaining strategic goals even under heavy international criticism or economic pressure. And the argument is that many people perceive the United States as increasingly divided internally, while Israel projects an image of concentrated national resolve during periods of conflict. Whether one agrees with this analysis or not, it reflects a broader global debate about the future structure of international power. Ultimately, the deeper issue is not simply about one war or one region. It is about whether the post-World War II global order can survive an era of rising multipolarity, economic instability, regional conflicts, and declining trust in traditional institutions. History shows that transitions between world orders are rarely peaceful or predictable. They are periods of uncertainty where old systems weaken before new systems fully emerge. And that is why many analysts view the Middle East not merely as a regional conflict zone, but as one of the central pressure points in a much larger transformation of global power.